Let's get into some of today's political stories with News Corp senior writer and columnist Patrick Carlyon. Patrick, I can't get over, we've got to give all this extra money to the ABC. They should have some sort of performance management, KPIs, whatever it might be, attached to this kind of money. I mean, can you think of any other media company that in the face of such a decline in ratings and listenership and viewership, etc., that would be able to go off and get more funding for what it does?
No, of course not. I mean, as a journalist, I only wished that those measures and those KPIs didn't apply to everybody else. And like you, Caleb, I mean, the state of the ABC makes me sad. I grew up relying on it, trusting in it. It was the go-to for national elections or federal budgets or whatever. Now it's sort of been ambushed by agendas. And I think this has been going on for a long time. I mean, you've talked about things that sort of have happened in the last sort of 12 months. But it's become irrelevant over the last decade. And I think it's really become noticeable this year because the world, whether it's Europe, America, and now Australia, has turned against those woke agendas. We're sick of being lectured to. We're sick of being told how we ought to do things. And it's really disappointing because the ABC is such an important institution and should continue to be.
Well, if they said that every single one of those $83.1 million was being spent in the regions and in rural parts of Australia, I might have a different opinion of it. And that's what the ABC can do best. But as we know, over the last few years, they basically concentrated everything into Ultimo in Sydney, and they don't care about the regions and rural areas anymore. They got rid of local news bulletins on Sunday nights. Then they had the grand idea, we're going to decentralise a little bit. So they built new studios in Parramatta in the middle of suburban Sydney. I mean, give me a spell. Now, tomorrow we get the mid-year economic and fiscal outlook. And I had to laugh today at the way Treasurer Jim Chalmers was framing it, because there will be increases in spending on Medicare, the PBS, pensions, amongst other things. So they're turning the tables on the opposition and saying, well, if you wouldn't spend this, then you want to cut Medicare. Take a look.
Now, when the Coalition says that this is overspending, what they really mean is they're coming after Medicare and medicines and pensions.
So you can just spend as much as you want, I suppose, by that logic. And the Australian revealed today that Labor are baking in an extra $25.1 billion in extra spending, which will be all detailed tomorrow. But what a great trick. If you're not willing to spend more money on Medicare to increase the budget, then you must be going to cut the thing. It reeks a bit of Mediscare.
Oh, absolutely, and we saw how that went, Caleb, didn't we? Look, a federal budget's no different to a household budget. You cannot spend more than you earn, and I think it was economist Chris Richardson who talked about the fact over the Jim Chalmers budget that Albanese government has spent $100 billion more, and it's actually gained, I think, $44 billion in extra revenue. So there's $60 billion there that's been spent that hadn't been earned. And look, we're going to hear these. We're going into an election. We're going to hear the cost of living, along with energy, is going to be, the big ticket sort of items come election time. We're going to hear all sorts of claims from both sides, to be fair. But I think when you start using terms like unavoidable costs to explain, a growth in spending, that's starting to get very tricksy very quickly, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And of course, we know the RBA said multiple times it's government spending that's driving inflation at the moment. So they may as well kiss goodbye to the interest rate reduction that they want. And this is the other thing, of course, it's not just the national accounts that Labor needs to justify to voters. It's their individual economic situations, as we've been talking about for weeks now, 7 straight quarters of household GDP going backwards. And I read this article in the Sydney Morning Herald today about how to budget for next year. And it mentions that a survey by comparison website Finder found, that 20% of Australians faced a financial emergency this year. 1 in 5 Australians was struggling to get by on the amount of money they had. How is the government meant to tell people at a federal election next year that they've been better off under an Albanese government?
Well, they're going to find it very difficult. And I'm actually surprised it's only 1 in 5, to be honest, Caleb. I would have thought more. I mean, I know so many renters who can't afford to move out, but they can't afford to stay. Interest rates have stayed high for a very prolonged period. And I think there hasn't been any optimism, and there is no optimism. There's no sort of blue skies ahead. It's certainly not before the election. It's not going to get better overnight. And I think people are just tired. They're tired of wondering how they're going to pay for this or pay for that. It's sort of become a way of life that has sort of, I don't know how a federal government that oversaw these conditions can actually claim that it's somehow made it better, because it certainly doesn't feel better to any ordinary Australian, does it?
No, it doesn't. Very quickly before we go, Victoria, where you are, the Premier Jacinta Allen today announced that face masks will be banned at protests and they won't be able to carry glue, rope, blocks, that kind of thing. Fair enough, I reckon.
Oh, absolutely. Look, it's a pity that you needed to get a synagogue firebombed to inspire these laws. I mean, why do you need to wear a face mask? Why do you need to protest outside places of worship? I mean, these are deplorable scenes, and they've been going on for so long. Josh Frydenberg wrote a nice column in the weekend papers. He talked about when it's not dealt with, when anti-Semitism is not dealt with properly, it becomes normalised. And that's what's happened, I think, right across Australia, but certainly here in Victoria.
Yeah, and it will also crack down, hopefully, on the crazy Extinction Rebellion people. I mean, that's why they're mentioning glue, etc.
Yes.
In this kind of thing. The more of this we can stop, the better. Patrick Carlyon, thank you for your time.